For years, empathy has been treated like a soft skill, nice to have, but not essential. But what if empathy isn't a weakness at all? What if it's your greatest leadership advantage? Well, today on Transformation Station, we're reframing empathy as the superpower that it really is. I know you're ready, so let's dig into this conversation. Welcome back to Transformation Station, the podcast where we explore the inner shifts that create lasting impact in how we lead and how we live, and yes, how we connect. I'm your host, Adrienne Benton, and today's episode challenges the outdated narratives that we have about strength and leadership. Today, we're talking about empathy, not as an emotional overextension, but as awareness and presence and power. And listen, today I have some exciting news. This is a live broadcast. And so, are you ready to hear the news? Ooh, I know you are. Well, listen, because of you and your faithfulness to helping grow this podcast, we crossed over the 3,000 podcast download mark. Yes, yes. Give yourselves a round of applause. Listen, I want to say thank you so much. As a matter of fact, today we actually are at 3,100. And so I want to invite you. If you have missed an episode in season 1 or season 2, go back. It's time to go back and get caught up. But also, we are a very friendly and giving community. So I'm going to invite you to give the gift of one of these episodes to a friend, to another leader in your community, so that we can take Transformation Station past 4,000, past 5,000, literally all around the world. Well, listen. Today, I have an amazing guest that I'm super excited for you to meet as we have this conversation about empathy as a superpower. Her name is Dr. Melissa Robinson WineMiller. Now, she isn't just talking about leadership, she actually will challenge us to do it differently. With over 20 years of cross-industry experience, she helps leaders build emotional intelligence cultures that don't just feel better, they actually perform better. Now, she's on a mission to prove that the so-called soft skills are the ones driving the hard results. And the future of leadership actually depends on them. I want to say welcome, 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 Dr. WineMiller. We're so happy to have you here with us today on Transformation Station.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Adrienne. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on getting more and more views. It just shows you're making a difference and it's catching and carrying.
Thank you so much. Dr. Wyman, I have been super excited and looking forward to this conversation because empathy is one of those topics that are so relevant and so important, yet it's one that we really don't have in open forums too often. But, but I have found over the years that as I've been in over 2 decades of leadership, that empathy changes the way I lead, the way I listen, the way I decide to show up. It at times has allowed me to really understand what's happening beneath the surface, not just what is being said out loud. And I know
Yeah.
that this conversation that we're going to have about empathy is going to help us to reclaim our strategic strength as leaders. So I want to start off by asking you this question. Okay. Empathy, talked about often, but rarely practiced. How do you define empathy as a true leadership strength?
Well, I think we have to start by defining what it's not or
Okay.
getting rid of some myths that are out there because
Okay.
we have this idea that empathy is all about feeling, right? I feel what you feel,
Mm-hmm.
but there's 43 different definitions of empathy. Feeling is one.
Hmm.
There's
Oh,
all these other ways that we have empathy. So, at its basis, empathy is about understanding others through perspective taking. And that
okay.
can be through feeling. But there's cognitive empathy, which means I logically understand what your perspective is. I just
Mhm.
don't necessarily feel anything. There's
Mm.
self-empathy, which is something that a lot of leaders miss, you know, and if you can't give empathy to yourself, not only are you going to be unable to give it to anybody else, but
Person.
that's where you start falling into these holes where people end up with substance abuse and imposter syndrome and problems with families and burnout. So I
Mm.
think we really need to be sure that we're talking about the same thing here, right? Because otherwise, people are just like, empathy is great. Empathy is wonderful. Use more empathy. Okay, well, great. Well, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Just go use it. Well,
I
no,
see.
I need to know what it is.
That's so true. So let me ask you this question, right? Or I want to share this thought and ask for your perspective, right? So if I hear you correctly, empathy as a strength is not about being passive. It's not about being emotional, but it's
Right?
about being accurate and present. For me, I focus on the word present, but accurate and present and effective with people. And I think over the years, many times I have heard people refer to empathy as this emotionally based thing, right? And so if you're an empathetic leader, you're weak, you're soft,
Yeah.
people are going to run all over you, right? But what you're saying
Right.
is this actually helps me to get more organized, more disciplined, and to be present authentically. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all of that because that's the thing. Empathy is the thing that allows us to connect as humans. And the trick is that I need to be able to see your perspective through your eyes, not through my eyes, through
Mm,
your eyes. And I mean, you think about it in terms of leadership, right? If you
mm,
want to understand your employees, you want to understand your stakeholders, you want to understand your board of directors,
mhm,
looking at it through your own eyes and saying, well, it's like this, and this is how it is, and this is how we should proceed, gives you inaccurate information, which
mm,
means that now when you move forward, you're looking to step into a big hole. Whereas if
mhm,
you're understanding the perspective of these other people, that's a strength. That is a superpower because now you understand the path that you're going to take and why.
mm. And that why is so key and so important.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question, right? Many leaders, many of us, we worry that empathy will make us appear soft, right? But
Yeah.
but can you hone in a little bit more, double down on how can empathy actually increase as a leader? How can being empathetic actually increase my influence or increase the trust that my team has for me? Or even better, how can it increase my performance?
Well, so let's do data because I
Okay.
love data. I love metrics. There was a study that was done by Ernst and Young, the big four consulting firm, right? International. And this was done in the wake of the Great Resignation. This would have been right around 2021, 2022. And they surveyed these major companies and these leaders. And specifically, what they wanted to know was how empathy helps these leaders, especially in the wake of turbulent times. And what they found was that leaders that use empathy increase their productivity of their teams by 87%,
Wow.
innovation by 86%, and
Mm,
profit by 84%.
that's
And this
huge.
isn't my opinion. This
Mhm,
is what Ernst and Young came up with. So it's
mhm,
there. So
mhm,
anybody that feels that it's weak, I would
mhm,
challenge them to rethink it. I mean,
mm.
authors like Brene Brown have been talking about how
Yes,
vulnerability and using empathy is
yes.
not weak since like 2009. And yet
Mhm.
these myths still are out there.
6,
So
yes.
I would challenge them to think, how is this weak if it's going to give me this kind of outcome?
Mhm. Yeah, those are strong numbers too, and you can't refute, when you see numbers like that. As you were
Yeah.
talking, I was thinking about this, right? That empathy builds credibility before authority. There's a
Yes.
lot of conversation right now, Melissa, about psychological safety. And as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking to myself that when we as leaders take time to understand the people who are on our teams, it earns us not just psychological safety for the culture, but psychological credibility. I think about people who have led me in the past, and I stop to think what caused me to trust them. Part of it was the empathy, part of it was them taking the time to, at least in my mind, understand. Taking the time to
Yes.
hear me, taking the time to affirm, or taking the time to at least cause my voice to be heard so that I felt valued. And so before we found ourselves in a situation where they had to be authoritative, there was a psychological credibility that was already inside of me. So when we found ourselves in those critical moments, there wasn't hesitation. because there was a
Right.
psychological credibility that had already been built in. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I would actually point out that a lot of those leaders, at least in my life, they haven't been especially soft. They're not really necessarily touchy-feely people,
Mhm,
but I felt they understood me and
mhm,
that I could understand and trust them. I mean,
mm,
empathy is not sometimes the hardest people that you know are some of the most empathetic. And
yes.
it doesn't mean you have to be soft. The other myth that's out there is like with empathy, you just give and people walk over you and you're, this
Mhm,
kind of leader that's a doormat. And that's wrong too.
mhm,
Having empathy does not mean you don't have boundaries or that
mm.
business doesn't get done. That's not empathy. That's being a pushover.
Say that
So
again. Say that again, please. I think we need to hear that again. Say that again, please.
having empathy does not mean you don't have boundaries. You
Mm,
have boundaries, which is part of where the courage and strength comes from.
mhm,
Being the doormat is not having empathy. That's being a
mercy,
pushover.
mercy, mercy. So here in Transformation Station, we always like to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to do some reflection. And to every leader that's listening, I think this is a really good place to stop and to reflect, because Dr. WineMiller has shared with us some really key gems as it pertains to empathy, what it is and how it looks and how it can be executed in our daily life and in our daily practices, right? So, what do you think about this one? I was also thinking about this one. Empathy improves decision quality leaders who listen deeply, gathering better information.
Drop the mic. There's
Yeah.
nothing there's nothing I can add to that. I mean, it's exactly like we were talking about, right? If you take the time to understand your people, to understand your customers, your stakeholders, your board, whoever, you're
Mhm.
going to make better decisions because you've got all the information.
Wow. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. 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 So there's this impression in some leadership circles, again, that empathy is soft, right? But
Mhm.
you helped organizations improve profit, retention, and productivity through emotional intelligence, right? So,
Yeah.
what do you say to leaders who still don't see the business case for empathy?
You know, I recently worked I'll give you an example because I was recently working with a director who had gone in as an interim, and his people, his higher ups, wanted him to come in and change the culture. And that's a big thing right now too, because people are understanding that this culture also affects profit, productivity, and innovation. So he was like, "Okay, what do I do with this? I have no idea." And I was like, "Start by knowing your people. Go into their files, read about them, understand what's going on. We're going
Mm,
to get you to build your know, like, and trust factor is what we're going
mm,
to do. And we're going to do it by making sure they understand you're a human being." So
mm,
what I suggested is that every day he make his rounds. This was a medical facility. So, go make just like a doctor, go make your rounds. And this doesn't mean you've got to go out and, do coffee hour for in long periods of time. It
mhm.
means you get up from your computer, which is also a plus because people spend too much time in front of their screens. And
Yes.
you go down to where they are and you just say, "Hey, how you doing?" You're seen, you're noticed. People know that you're there. That's it.
Mm,
20 minutes once a day. Well, by seeing him day after day, his people began to know him, and then they
mhm,
began to feel that they could trust him. And they started coming to him with innovative ideas to create efficiencies, things that they knew were a problem. Now,
mhm,
here's the thing, these are people that had been in their positions for 10, 20, 30 years.
mm,
They already knew where the inefficiencies were. They just didn't trust anybody to be able to talk and say,
mhm,
"Look, we can do this better." They got
mm,
used to being beaten down. But by
mhm,
being able to talk to him, they were able to walk in and say, "Well, yeah, we can do this better. We can create efficiencies here. We really need to up this part of the department," this sort of thing. So they
mhm,
trusted him enough to be able to come forward and do this innovative stuff.
mhm,
Through the ability to put these efficiencies and innovations into place, his department turned a profit for the first time in 10 years.
mhm,
And all of this happened in about 90 days.
mm.
Now,
That's
you
amazing.
can't yeah, you can't set a culture in 90 days,
Mhm,
but, it's just like playing football and getting a really good play right out of the right away. It definitely sets the tone for the rest of the game, and that's exactly what he did. And there's the people that hired him going, "Well, how did you do that?" And it's like, "I got out and let them know I'm a human being."
mm. Yeah, and I think we'll talk about this in a little bit. That can be so challenging for leaders, right? Because you're thinking about so many different things as a leader. You're thinking about respect, you're thinking about meeting the mission and, the time that it takes. And you're also, concerned. I mean, there are real concerns about being taken advantage of, or people not respecting you, or people getting too familiar, right? Taking advantage of the
Oh
fact that
yeah.
they, quote unquote, feel like they know you. However,
Mhm.
I hear you saying that there should be appropriate boundaries that are in place, but that human factor is what people still crave, that will cause them to settle down and to really engage. So I want to ask you this question, right? We're talking about empathy in theory. You gave us an example of how it can be applicable, right, in the workplace, but now let's take it one step further. What does applying emotional intelligence actually look like in a tough business conversation? Because I find, Dr. WineMiller, that many times this is where the rubber meets the road. It isn't necessarily being empathetic that's the big overarching issue. It's now me, I'm applying it in a conversation because many of us do not like conflict.
Yes.
So, how do we apply this in a tough business conversation?
This is a fantastic question because we've been talking about emotional intelligence. The first article on this came out in 1991, which
Mm,
means we have been kicking this around for 35 years and we still don't have it figured out exactly.
mm,
The one of the big books that came out on this was in 95 by Daniel Goleman, and it was, how EQ is more important than IQ, right?
mhm.
And that these emotional intelligence skills are there. And he broke it down into 5 or 6 categories, something like that, so it's like a big basket of tools, right? You've got communication and motivation and leadership and all this stuff in there. And he put one of the tools in this basket as empathy.
Okay.
Well, my suggestion is that you actually have to take empathy out of this tool basket and start with empathy. Because if you haven't connected and understand the perspective of the people you're working with, when you
Mm,
reach into that emotional intelligence tool bag,
I
you
see.
don't know if you want to grab a hammer or a saw.
Mm.
So the empathy has to come first.
To come first. Wow. Wow. That's good. Like I'm stopping to process this myself. That's really good. That's really good. So yeah. Wow. That's really good. I was along the what I'm pausing because along those same lines, I'm thinking of this regulating yourself first, right? Like before the conversation begins, emotionally intelligent leaders check their own, let's put it up again, check their own state of being.
Yes. Yep. And I think part and parcel of that too is this idea of self empathy. What
Mm,
is it about this person that triggers me? Because I'm about to go into a meeting with this person that triggers me every time. What is
mm,
it in me that's creating this? How am
mm,
I feeling walking into this? Am I on edge? Am I
mm,
walking into conflict, or is this my own imposter syndrome kicking in? The self empathy to be able to understand that
mm,
even leaders are human. They may wear a cape, but they still are
mm,
human beings like the rest of us. So that connection to self-empathy and really being able to understand who you are
mhm.
before you step into that leadership role is exactly what you're talking about, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, the situation not too long ago, very recently, with an individual who I was working with, and I noticed that something was just kind of off. I couldn't put my finger on it because they were still performing, they were still smiling, but something was just, and I just stopped to say, "Hey, how are you?" And lo and behold, they told me they had just gotten a text that really rocked their world. It was a serious situation, but they were trying to push through. And in that moment, for me as a leader, I'm looking at the situation like what we're doing is not that life critical that we can't give this person. I said, you know what? Take 15 minutes, go outside, breathe, return the phone call, and come back in. They came back in much more settled. But it was in that moment choosing to just stop, pause, ask, empathy. And leaders,
Yes.
what Melissa is talking to us about. It's simple in terms of that first step, making the choice, choosing to I think there's a phrase that says understand before you are understood. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. And you actually just hit on one of the most important tools I give the people I work with.
Mm,
Because if you're trying to understand empathy, through the eyes of the other person. Sometimes that's hard to do because we
Mhm.
haven't had all the experiences in the world. We don't know.
Yes.
So your biggest tool is to be able to say, "Can you explain that to me from your perspective? I
Mm.
don't know everything. Can you explain it to me, please? I want to understand." And it
Mhm.
seems so simple, but
Mhm.
it's that way of opening that door to be able to take perspective.
Mhm. Absolutely. And there's one more that I really am excited to share with you because this is one that I've seen so many times, right? Or I've seen that this has been lacking. Holding the standard without escalation.
Yes.
Emotionally intelligent leaders don't back away from expectations, you know. And oftentimes I've said there has to be a way that we can have a difficult conversation. There has to be a way that we can hold the standard without having to escalate into disrespect or yelling or name calling or all of these negative things. And so, you know, emotionally intelligent leaders use empathy to hold the standard without escalating. What are some of your thoughts about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that goes right along with having boundaries. My
Mm,
boundary is we expect this level of excellence. And
mm,
I
mm,
have empathy and I understand your perspective, but I'm not moving that boundary because this is what's best for everybody. If I'm going to have empathy for the group, this is
mm.
where it needs to be. The
Yes.
other thing I think that opens up is the difference between being kind and being nice.
Tell me.
So,
Me
yeah,
more.
nice is a social construct. It's like having manners. It's what we do to be able to get along better in society. I think of it as social lubrication because it helps keep the wheels greased and running. But
Mm,
usually, in one way or another, either it keeps us comfortable or it keeps the other person comfortable.
mm,
It's very surface.
mhm,
Kindness goes beyond that, and you're starting to look at the other person's perspective or your own perspective and say, "What is best in this situation?"
mm,
How can I do this in a way that's going to benefit as many as possible, if not everybody? And
mm.
that's the thing with empathy. It's not always nice, but it's always kind. And if you're dealing with these expectations, you can do it in a way that's kind, but you're holding those boundaries. So it doesn't need to be nice. It doesn't need to be comfortable. It
Yes.
doesn't need to be mannered. But
Yes.
with kindness, you raise the excellence of the entire organization.
Mm. And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, you raise the excellence and you also cause there to be a legacy. So many times
Yes.
we do things for the immediate moment and it does not last, right? But we
Right.
remember how people treat us. We may not remember everything that was said, but we will remember how we were treated. And it's interesting because, you know, you do a study on leaders and you watch them as they get promoted. Many times, leaders who did not like or appreciate a treatment that they received when they were junior end up turning around and doing that same thing that they did not like to those who are now in that position that they were in.
Yes.
Mm,
Yes, because that's well, 2 reasons. I mean, that's what you learn, right?
mm,
Because if that's what you're watching and that's what you're doing, you may
mm,
not like it, but it's kind of like how abusive relationships just
mm,
kinda
mm,
keep, perpetuating themselves. It's
mm,
because that's what you see, that's what you've learned. The other
mm.
part of it is it becomes very easy to fall into the, "Well, this is how we do things.
Yes,
This is
yes,
our
yes,
it and
yes.
it takes thought and time to be able to say, "That was our culture, but we allowed that culture to happen. We didn't
Mm,
create that culture. That's just what happened. Let's create
mm,
a culture that's better."
mhm, mhm. Leaders who are listening and watching again, I'm going to invite you right now. This is a live broadcast. For those who are watching, I want to invite you to go ahead and put in the comment section what is resonating with you as we're having this conversation about empathy as a superpower, about emotional intelligence. Share with us. Maybe you have an experience that we would all benefit from, but what's resonating with you right now? So I want to ask you this question. You've been candid, Dr. WineMiller, about your career shift after experiencing unempathetic leadership firsthand. Can you take us back to that moment and what made you decide to turn that experience into your life work?
I don't know that there was a moment. I
Mhm,
think it was kind of a slow realization. So I was a performing musician for a long time. I played French horn and I loved it. I got to tour. I got to tour with people like Ray Charles and Mannheim Steamroller and Manhattan Transfer. But gigging music isn't always very solid. And I also really like food, shelter, and clothing. So I went and got my first doctorate and started teaching. I went to become a professor of French horn. And unfortunately, within my first term at this university, I was assaulted by one of my colleagues. And it started out bad, but then it got worse because of the toxic situation that I was in. Nobody wanted to hear about it. Nobody wanted to know. They wanted to just bury it. And I couldn't have put my finger on it at the time. But what I was in a toxic situation where there was no empathy. People did not want to connect. They didn't want to understand. They didn't want to know what my perspective was.
Mm.
So, I mean, unfortunately, I ended up having to leave that profession, which was hard because I was in my 40s by that time. That's,
Wow.
all I had done. And then COVID hit, and that was kind of the end of that. But I just couldn't quite let go of this idea of what went wrong. My husband and I went and did some consulting after that, mostly in healthcare. And I kept seeing the same patterns, leaders that wanted to do well, that were highly motivated, that were highly, Maslow's pyramid, self actualized, but they
Yes.
just seemed to miss the mark somehow with their people. And it caused all sorts of problems from employee attrition to loyalty to employee satisfaction. And so
Mhm.
I just started trying to figure out what is the thing that creates human connection? What is the thing that can create this perspective taking that, creates better organizations? And I
Mhm.
kind of stumbled on this idea of empathy and I wanted to really dig in on it. So I started my second doctorate so that I could really devote myself to this because I already had my experience. I knew what I thought, but I wanted to be able to back it up. I didn't
Mhm.
want to just, give opinions. I wanted to be able to say, here's what the research says. Here's
Mm.
what the current research says. And this is why. Here's how you learn it. So it's actually become a passion for me and kind of a lifetime path that I
Mhm.
really believe it's that important.
Mm, what a powerful testimonial. And I want to thank you so much for being authentic and honest with us. And to everybody who's watching right now, what's your story? We all have a story. What was that pivotal moment, that moment for you where you were able to turn your experiences around? And how can you, like Dr. WineMiller, how can you use these moments to impact others? So I'm going to ask you two final questions. Okay. Next one. What are some practical habits leaders can use daily to strengthen their empathy, especially when they're busy or under pressure?
So I really believe in starting with baby steps and building on stuff that people already know.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I suggest is always this idea of perspective taking through the other person's eyes. Start with actually trying to take a person, and it can be someone that you know. It can be someone you know really well, and you already think you know what the answer is going to be, and
Mm-hmm.
actually say, well, what is their perspective through their eyes?
Through their
Not through
eyes.
my own, through
Mhm.
theirs. It's the difference between walking in someone else's shoes and walking behind them. If you're
Mm,
walking behind them, you see the path they're on, but it's through your eyes. If you're
yes.
walking in their shoes, you see their path through their own eyes, and that's what you want. The other thing that leaders can start with is building this idea of self-empathy. And there's
Mhm.
4 steps.
Okay.
The first is self-observation, meaning you need to step back and observe what's happening without putting judgment on it, without putting emotional value on it, any of that. The second is that you have to actually self-reflect. Take a moment. Doesn't have to be hours. It doesn't have to be navel gazing, but reflect on your observations again without putting emotions on it. It's what I call being critical, not caring. The third is that you use this to understand self awareness. So, self reflection takes the lens inside and reflects how it is inside you. Self awareness looks at how this impacts the rest of the world. And this leads to self compassion, which is the action to empathy. Empathy is what you have going on the inside, what you feel, what you think. Compassion is what you do. And you may be surprised at what kind of self compassion you actually need for yourself.
Mm, this is powerful. I want to go back over the 4 steps one more time. And to everybody who's listening and watching, take some notes right here, right? Okay. So, first, you
Yeah.
said self observation. That's the
Yes.
first step. Okay.
Yep.
And then you invited us to self reflect. That's the next step. And
Yes.
then we move from there to self awareness. Okay. The next step. And then the last step is self compassion. Wow. This is
Yes.
powerful. We're getting a masterclass, leaders. We're getting a masterclass. So I want to invite you to, if you did not take notes right now, I want to invite you to go back and watch the replay and write this down, because literally Dr. WineMiller is giving us a formula on how we can move forward. So here's the final question. How can leaders create a culture where empathy is not just valued, but it is a lived experience that shapes team dynamics and decision making?
They have to start by living it themselves.
Mm.
I'm a musician, and for lack of a better word or of a better way of putting it, leaders are always on stage. Someone
Mhm.
is always watching. They are always learning, and they are always picking up what they're doing. You
Mhm.
cannot say in your mission, vision, and values that we have an empathetic organization and then not display that.
Mercy.
Charity starts at home. So these leaders have to start by displaying what they want, because that's how culture is built.
This is powerful. What an amazing conversation. I'm telling you, it really is. I honestly am going to go back and watch this and take some notes, because for myself as a leader, I literally am in taking notes and realizing even more so the value and the opportunity that being an empathetic leader is, and how it really is a strategic strength. And so, Dr. WineMiller, I know that there are leaders that are watching right now and listening, because we're audio and visual, listening and watching right now, that want to engage with you, that want to be able to tap into your resources. What's the best way to be able to do that?
The easiest way to catch me is through my website, which you've got on the bottom of the screen. It's V as in Victor, IA, empathy.com. I have a newsletter. There's a contact me place. I'm a speaker and an author. My TEDx just came out, and we're at 60,000 views in just a little over 6 weeks.
Wow.
So if you want to know a little more about me and what I'm about, there's that. My book, The Empathic Leader, How EQ via Empathy Transforms Leadership for Better Profit, Productivity, and Innovation, is on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and all the usuals. And we hit bestseller in 2 categories on Amazon in 4 countries. So I'm really excited that people are really picking up on this. And then, of course, I'm on the usuals.
Absolutely. So everybody watching right now and listening, our Dr. WineMiller's website is here on the screen. It's also in the description box. I want to invite you to go to her website, find her on LinkedIn, get her book on Amazon. We want to support Dr. WineMiller as much as possible. In addition to, she has resources. And so we know here that we are a community that learns together so we can grow together. And I'm going to invite you to reach out to Dr. WineMiller and let her know that you saw or you heard this podcast, and let her know what is resonating with you. Dr. WineMiller, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an honor and a privilege to have you here on Transformation Station.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much to you and your audience for having me. And this has just been dynamite. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Well, listen, today's message was simple. Empathy isn't something to outgrow, it is something to refine. And if this episode resonated with you, I'm going to invite you to do this. Take one moment this week to listen more deeply, to respond more intentionally, and to lead with curiosity instead of assumption. I also want to remind you, guess what is coming up? January 5 through 7, 2026, we are going to have the Lead Her Shift Conference, a virtual reset for women leaders. The registration will open up on December 24. You'll be able to find that on my LinkedIn page, Adrienne Townsend Benton, or Mobilizing with Impact, the Facebook page, Mobilizing with Impact. It's free. Can you believe this? It's free. We have amazing guests that are coming to join me. Absolutely free, but you do have to register. So December 24, registration opens up, register, and then invite another power woman, another woman leader that you want to grow with, so we can continue to build community. And remember, we hit 3,000, but we want to go to 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. Take us all around the world. All right. Well, listen, this has been amazing. Until next time, I want you to remember, leaders who make the greatest impact are the ones who understand people, not just processes.